have more gray hair or less hair. But what motivated me was meeting guys that were my age as a young filmmaker. I later became an epidemiologist, who were dying through no fault of their own and clearly getting sick at work. And what I saw were children then entering the workforce and treatment systems that were utterly inadequate, and felt we really needed to focus on prevention because no health ministry, no community can afford the burden that is dialysis and renal failure. So we really focus on a risk aversion approach, which I think a lot of you would appreciate. So today in the literature, it's well understood that it may not be the only cause, but it is the best identified driver of the disease is heat stress in these settings, and that it can be intervened upon and outcomes are improved upon through interventions that are fairly straightforward: rest, shade, hydration, sanitation, and the organizational commitment to provide those things. I like to say it's not so much the heat, it's the jerk who makes you work in it without a break. So what we've seen, of course, from heat stress and the volumes of publications we've created is increase of acute kidney injury due to heat stroke. That was well established. We showed then the chain from that AKI into full-blown chronic kidney disease. And that was recently published, both the preventative efforts and the etiological pathways in Kidney International, and also then in OEM just a couple months ago, back to back, over a 5-year cohort. But that wasn't always the case. And we were kind of in a problem because, you know, as the climate was getting warmer, this really nefarious thing was happening out there in research. What we started to see when we looked back and our own experience was, you know, the percentage of occupationally focused studies looking at occupational disease, when taken against all the studies being done on the community and occupational level, has fallen from nearly all of the studies back in the 60s. If you're trying to crack what was going on with an occupational illness, you were where the exposure was and where the population of interest was. And for multiple, hello, yeah.
I'm going to put a note.
So, oh, thank you. Yeah, it happens. No worries, guys. And so over time, we've seen that diminish. And I think that's something that a historian should look into. Why has it dropped? But it creates a real problem because we're missing the environment of interest, we're missing the exposures of interest, and we're missing the population of interest. Household surveys, I can tell you, having done them, the population who's not going to answer the door is largely the working age male, who we're concerned about in a lot of these populations because they're at work. So, you know, the good news is the ILO recognized the issue and the need for insight. And this report by the ILO was written by our La Isla Network member, Andreas Flores, last year, and features our work and that of probably many on the call. And we know that this is a massive productivity loss, and this is a big problem beyond just kidney disease. What I found interesting was this phrase: there's an urgent need for new evidence-based comprehensive measures and research to look for what's going on here and how to prevent it. But what if the clues were actually in the history? You may ask yourself, Jason, these guys are exposed to pesticides and metals. Like, why weren't you focused on that? And the answer is we were. Then while doing research on an etiological paper with my colleague, Eric Hansen, and this was also leaked to us from a company doctor who had found this many years ago, we found this old study from 1969-70 by Q et al. In the South African gold mines. And what they found was that among patients who had had heat stroke, they developed acute kidney injury. And out of that group that had the heat stroke and had acute kidney injury, 10% went on to go into full-blown kidney failure, permanent chronic kidney disease, within 3 months, 3 to 6 months. So that was something. We thought, well, that's kind of unknown. That's kind of lost knowledge. And then what we did 50 years later is assess these populations in a similar way, obviously using updated methods and analysis tools and a longer term cohort. And what we found is both the acute kidney injury and the subacute injury over time, those groups ended up with 10% of their EGFR, was 10% of them ended up with a non-recoverable kidney disease within 3 to 6 months. And all of them.
Malaysia.
All right. But what I've also want to bring to note is like you can have all the history and all the data, but if we're biased and we kind of want confirmation bias of what we think is going on with an illness, we can ignore data and we can ignore history and we will pursue our own ends, maybe for like where we got our funding or what we think is going on with an issue, because that is our specialty or that is our discipline. Like we're a specialist in pesticides, we're a specialist in metals, we're a specialist in heat, and we come blind to history and the data. And what I find interesting is 8 years before our work at the same sugarcane mill, another group that was convinced it was an exogenous toxin found that AKI that they had deemed as a mystery as to why it was happening, despite the data being very clearly from the occupational health department that these were heat strokes that were being referred to the clinic. They found that 8% of the AKI cases from the exact same mill developed full-blown chronic kidney disease within months of the injury event. So I think that's important to note. History won't save the day on its own, but it certainly can take a group that's pursuing good faith research in an interesting direction. And so, what did that historical insight create? It created one of the largest occupational health programs in the world. We developed a center of excellence at the mill in Nicaragua. We took those learnings and those practices and have expanded them to 3 mills in Central America and are also adapting those to other industries and geographies globally and have a project ongoing also in Mexico today. And honestly, I think this is such a hats off to the historians who I know and who taught me to dig into old literature to look at new problems. And without that, I think we'd still be stumbling in the dark, maybe missing one of the principal drivers. And so the results of that, we can all feel good about our contributions as the results have been pretty remarkable. And I just kind of share these briefly because I think we should be proud of what we collectively can do together. We basically eliminated the hospitalized acute kidney injuries due to heat stroke. We completely eliminated the decline in EGFR, kidney function. And for the industry folks, when you protect people, people are more productive per hour and they actually produce more, not less. So the old argument that if I give people breaks, I'm going to lose money was also torpedoed because of this very early insight from Q 50 years ago about protecting people leads to better outcomes. And then we also provided an ROI for the company. So I'm pretty proud of what we accomplished, but I'm left with a few questions from this story. What other life-saving insights are buried in the historical record? How can we ensure the lessons unearthed by historians are heard and taken up in the academy and the community's practice? And how can we as the subcommittees of ICOH support such an effort? I can think of a few activities or endeavors that would be more important. And again, I just want to reiterate that truly it was unearthing the historical record and forgotten knowledge that allowed us to protect this workforce in Mesoamerica and allowed us to pursue that going forward. Thanks for your time. And I'm just such an honor to be here. And I hope I did not go over time.
Thank you, Mr. Jason. Thanks for the support from the scientific committee from the scientific committee of ICOH, because it's been a very important contribution. Oh, excuse me, I'm going to share.
So I will take some historical examples, not the most known, such I will not talk about asbestos, for example, or lead intoxications, because many of you might know these histories also. I've taken some less known examples, and each of these examples they illustrate a certain aspect, I think. So the first three cases I will discuss are about cancers. The first is actually the first identification of an occupational cancer, which is an interesting story. Then a story about miners getting a disease which appeared to be cancer, lung cancer more specifically. Then the story about bladder cancer in dye workers, how that was discovered and elaborated. Then a story that is not so well known is the discovery of systemic sclerosis or scleroderma in stonemasons due to silica exposure. Then there's the story of the infertility in pesticides workers producing a chemical called DBCP. And then to conclude, a more recent example on bronchiolitis obliterans in popcorn workers. So I'll start with the first one, which is more than 2 centuries ago, where a surgeon in London treating several types of patients, but among these his patients were many with cancer of the skin of the scrotum, and he noticed actually an unusual pattern. And this is the start of the discovery actually of the first occupational cancer. He saw that very young men got this cancer of the skin of the scrotum, and many of them had been chimney sweepers. So at the time in London, it was very common to employ children to clean the chimneys. And one of the reasons was that the chimneys at the time in London tend to be very narrow, and adults couldn't even pass the chimneys. But so he noticed this strange occurrence. He did a lot of activism also to get the child labor in this profession to get it banned also. But at the same time, he also had an hypothesis immediately that it was the soot, so the product of combustion, that was causing actually the cancer, because it got lodged in the skin folds of the scrotum, and by this caused the cancer. Many initiatives were taken, and eventually the practice of employing children in this profession was banned. Also, the occupational hygiene improved, and actually the cancer in chimney sweeps disappeared thanks to preventive action, even without knowing very specifically what was the cause. Soot was the hypothesis, but what component of soot, that was not so clear. And many years later, actually, also in a study by a London doctor, it was seen that indeed chimney sweeps among patients with cancer of the scrotum, of the skin of the scrotum, chimney sweeps became rare among this population, and there was another population that appeared, more specifically mule spinners. And this is a picture taken by one of the authors of this article, who visited the factory, which then was more common than now. I think that physicians do these things. And mule spinning. This is a man operating a mule spinning machine, and particular about this machine was that it used mineral oils on the spindles as a lubricating oil, and this mineral oil was actually thrown out as the spindles revolved, contaminating the whole machine, also the work clothes of these workmen. And actually their clothes got contaminated with the mineral oil, which appeared to contain the carcinogenic agent, which later appeared to be polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. The same agent that was causing the cancer in the chimney sweeps had reappeared in a different profession. And I think this is a lesson we can learn from this, that occupational diseases can disappear due to improvement in prevention, but can reappear in new circumstances. And this is the same we often see with happening with silicosis, for example. Something else a bit in another region of Europe is the story of Schneeberg lung disease. So this is Germany, and at the border of what is now the Czech Republic, there are mountains called ore mountains, and already since 5 centuries, this is an important center of mining. First, there were silver discovered, and later on many more metals that have been mined. And among local physicians, with two famous physicians there being Paracelsus and Agricola, they already called it bergzucht or miner's sickness. But actually, their descriptions of the disease were fairly non-specific, and probably it referred to a whole range of respiratory conditions, bronchitis, TB, pneumoconiosis, lung cancer. But at the beginning of the 19th century, there appeared a specific type of this disease in a mining town called Schneeberg. And what was so specific that there were miners that became ill after a few years of work. They got cough, increasing shortness of breath, and often they died very quickly after some months or years. And due to the geographic distribution of the disease, they called it Schneeberg lung disease. And local physicians, mining doctors and others, they got very interested in this disease. And in the 1860s, two local physicians, Herting and Hesse, they started to do autopsies in these diseased miners from this specific lung disease, and sent them to a newly established pathological institute very nearby in Leipzig. And there it was discovered that it was actually a lung cancer. And this was actually, and in one of their articles, they noticed that the local inhabitants of the miner villages, they already appeared to know this actually, and they used the term of lung cancer already before it was confirmed by these two physicians. So actually, this was a diagnosis, let's say, made by lay persons, verified by these two physicians with the help of these new histological investigations they did. So the epidemiological side of the story is they counted the numbers, but it was not really formal epidemiology. But they ended up with a calculation that said that probably 75% of all the diseased miners died of this lung cancer. Then, of course, the question was, what was the cause of this disease? And there were several candidates, and there was arsenic, nickel, cobalt, and of course silica. But then there was a new hypothesis that emerged at the end of the 19th century because radioactivity was discovered. And there had been some measurements done in the air of these mines, which measured extremely high levels of radioactivity, up to 600,000 becquerel per square meter. And here you can see it compared with the current WHO standard of 100 becquerel. And it was actually one of the mine directors who suggested that there might be a link between radon, which is a radioactive gas, and lung cancer. And radon is something strange. It is a gas, but it's actually a natural gas that is in the decay chain of uranium, and the underground in these ore mountains, there was a lot of uranium. So this was an important reason why there was so much radioactivity in these mines. But it was absolutely not generally accepted that the radon could cause lung cancer. Actually, the fact that many of these miners also had silicosis was still the predominant hypothesis that this was actually the cause of this lung cancer. And this changed actually when at a certain moment in the 20th century, Nazi Germany, they occupied one part of Bohemia in which there were also mines. And one of the big mining towns was Joachimsthal. And there they also started investigating the incidence of lung cancer. And it appeared to be equal to that on the other side of the border, which provided strong support for the radon hypothesis, because in this region there was much less silica in the rock, and also no arsenic. So radon appeared to be a good explanation, and later this was confirmed in animal research. Another cancer of which the discovery started with a very astute clinician was bladder cancer in Thai workers. Actually, at the end of the 19th century, a German physician found 3 cases of bladder cancer in a factory of about 45 workers that produced a dye, actually, fuchsin. He thought, because one of the chemicals that was used was aniline, that this was the cause of this bladder cancer, and hence the name aniline tumor was used early on. This was confirmed in other factories. Even in Switzerland, there was an independent outbreak, very similar, where they concluded that the incidence of bladder cancer among these workers was more than 30 times higher than in the general population. An important novelty then that confirmed this association was the use of animal experiments. This had been done before, but never for bladder cancer, actually. And it was a German pathologist who emigrated to the US, who started to do experiments on dogs, because he thought they would metabolize the causative agents, which were supposed to be aromatic amines. They metabolized them in a similar way as humans. And he managed to induce experimentally in dogs with a specific aromatic amine a bladder cancer. And this is actually the first time that there was a model for chemically induced bladder cancer. Of course, then the question is this relevant for humans? And the final, let's say, confirmation came from epidemiological work, which was also seminal, because before that, epidemiology was still a beginning discipline. But this researcher, Robert Case, from the Institute of Cancer Research in London, he invented more or less the historical cohort study. So what he did, he took a complete list of 21 companies where there was exposure to these aromatic amines, and then he searched for death certificates which mentioned bladder cancer, and then he looked in the list of the men that had worked in the companies, if they were on the same list. And he found actually that in the group of 4,600 men, you would expect 4 cases of bladder cancer, but actually he found 127. So also a risk of bladder cancer that was 30 times higher than the general population. Something that is not related to cancer is this story. It's from Scotland, actually, where in the beginning of the 20th century, a physician called Bramwell, he was a general internal medicine doctor, and he had some patients with a rare disease called systemic sclerosis, or scleroderma, as it is called in some languages. It's a rare disease, systemic autoimmune disease, and he had 9 patients among his 20,000 patients in total. But he noticed something strange, which is that 5 of these 9 patients were stonemasons. So he thought, okay, probably this job has something to do with the disease. And one of the symptoms of systemic sclerosis is something called Raynaud phenomena, which is a vasculopathy, which is at the level of the hands, causing symptoms there. So his hypothesis was that it were the cold chisels that these stonemasons used to machine to work on their stones. That was causing actually the disease. This was a good hypothesis, but it appeared to be wrong, and it was in the 50s, actually in South Africa, that the link between silica exposure and systemic sclerosis was for the first time shown, and since then many studies have shown a positive association between silica exposure, which we of course know from the disease silicosis, but silica also appears to be causing this autoimmune disease. And even in some countries, this is now a recognized occupational disease, in France, for example, and in Belgium, and in South Africa in miners also. Then there is a story about infertility among pesticide workers, which started in California. In California, in a company called Occidental Chemical. The workers there, they actually packaged and mixed a whole range of products, but there was one product more specifically in a certain division that was used, and it was called DBCP. And in 77, while talking with each other, the workers came across that some of them were unable to father children, so their wives didn't get babies. And many of these workers, they worked in the same division where they formulated this chemical. And it was actually the trade union who organized sperm analysis for these workers in 7 volunteers. And the sperm counts were or 0 or so low that they proved that these workers were sterile, actually. They even expanded their study and found a very strong relationship between exposure duration to this chemical and sperm counts, and especially in the ones that worked for longer than 3 years in this company, the effect was very strong. So then they asked government help, and NIOSH intervened. And this was 77, but actually this chemical was already on the market for 20 years by then, not only in the US, but it was also exported to the rest of the Americas, also to the Philippines and other countries. And apparently there had been toxicities testing done by 2 of the major producers, Dow and Shell, who independently found that in rats exposed to this chemical, they became sterile, and the testes they shrunk. And they jointly published their report almost 20 years before these workers realized that they had been exposed. And apparently the workers were not actually informed about the dangers of this chemical. Eventually there was a ban in the US, but that didn't prevent Shell and Dow from producing it longer and also exporting it. And at least until 85, it had been used in Latin America. And this is a news article from BBC from a few years ago on this topic, where many workers spraying these pesticides appear to become sterile also. To conclude, this is the last story of a disease called bronchiolitis obliterans. And here it was not a clinician or the workers who noticed there was a relationship with work, but it was the wife of one of the workers. So it started with one worker who had he had a skin disorder, probably work-related, but also breathing problems. And his wife actually knew that 4 of his former co-workers, also had this problem. And she talked to a lawyer who then even found 3 more. So in total, 8 workers had a lung disease, but there was something strange about this lung disease. So it appeared very quickly after getting in the job, sometimes even after a few months. And it was not asthma, actually. It was a fixed obstructive lung disease. They received some diagnoses, but probably all these diagnoses were not 100% correct. It could appear to be smoking related, but most of them didn't smoke. And also it was very quick for a smoking related disease. And even none of the workers themselves thought it was work related. But the occupational physician who interviewed them thought, okay, this is something strange. It is very suggestive for a disease called bronchiolitis obliterans, which is a very rare disease. And this started investigations by NIOSH, which actually showed that it was mainly people that were working in this company, where they produced microwave popcorn, the ones that were mixing the flavoring with salt and oil and putting the flavoring in the popcorn bags, that they were developing the disease. So in this study done by NIOSH, they found that 4 out of 13 former mixers developed this severe disease. And then also among the ones that were packaging, but none of the other workers had developed this disease. And later on, it appeared that it was one compound of the butter flavor called diacetyl, which is harmless to eat, but appeared to be very toxic when inhaled. And it was present in very high concentrations in these mixing rooms. So to conclude, I think that observations made by clinicians, workers, their family members, have played a very important role throughout history to identifying hazards. Often before any animal experiments have been done, any epidemiological research has been done to confirm. And I think this is sometimes something that might be lost due to the great difficulties of doing epidemiological research and the complexity. So this is a plea for being attentive for these kind of sentinel events. And to conclude, I just want to make a short publicity for our conference, which will in April next year. If you scan the QR code, you come at the website, which is made by La Isla, and there is a call for abstracts open. So please submit or don't submit, but just come to the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Steven, for such a great presentation, for sharing some of the most important lessons that could be very helpful for us in our daily practice, and also for improving our work based on the previous and key lessons. It is very important to remember the origin and evolution of occupational medicine with all the examples that you just mentioned. Thank you, Dr. Steven. Now, it would be my pleasure to introduce you to our next speaker. Let me share. So, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Rejen Naidoo, who is a professor and head of the department in Occupational and Environmental Health at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and has been in academic research for about 25 years. He's a medical specialist in occupational medicine. His areas of research are focused on occupational and environmental respiratory diseases, particularly as a result of workplace exposures or ambient air pollution, and more recently on weather-related health effects, with projects funded by major national and international agencies, including the National Research Foundation, U.S. National Institutes of Health, and the European Union. He has over 120 peer-reviewed publications with presentations at several international conferences. He is an associate editor in the International Archives of Occupational and Environmental Health and the Journal of Occupational Medicine and Toxicology, as well as on the editorial board of the American Journal of Industrial Medicine and Environmental Epidemiology. He received his postgraduate training in occupational medicine at the University of Cape Town and his doctorate at the University of Michigan. Dr. Rajan, he is currently the PI on the Mother and Child in the Environment MACE birth cohort focused on the impacts of ambient and indoor air pollution on the respiratory health of children and the Wellcome Trust-funded Child Heat Impact Climate Health Intervention, investigating the impacts of heat on the respiratory health of children in Durban, South Africa, Harare, Zimbabwe, and Haramaya, Ethiopia. He has previously been the PI on several large air pollution and respiratory health studies in South and Southern Africa, funded by international and national agencies. So welcome, Dr. Rajan. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Many thanks to Norville for that introduction, as well as to colleagues for inviting me to present here. I'd like to express my appreciation for inviting the Scientific Committee for the History of the Prevention of Occupational and Environmental Diseases to co-host this very important meeting. I am going to turn off my video now. When I got this invitation, I wanted to understand why the Peruvian National Committee of ICOH was keen on this date of the 4th and 5th of October. And it is because of the Day of the Occupational Physician. So I was curious as to why this had a particular importance in Peru. And I then went through and looked at, sorry, my slides are not changing. And looked at the history of occupational and environmental health in South America. So my talk today is to look at the history of occupational medicine and what were the lessons that we've learned and to what extent we've really learned or to what extent we need to refocus and in the ways we go about protecting workers. So let's start with a little story. I'm sure many of you would already know this in the room, especially if you are from Peru, but this is what I picked up from the internet. In 1875, there was a febrile illness which was affecting the workers in the town of Callao in Peru. And apparently hundreds of railroad workers died. So clearly an occupational disease. The experts there suspected a link to what was known as Peruvian warts, but there was no direct proof of the connection. It took a young medical student who decided that he needed to prove one way or the other what was the cause of this. And this student went about injecting himself with the microbe. And today he's recognized in Peru as a hero and medical martyr. So clearly there is a long history in Peru around the issues of workers' health and how do we address these and make these diagnoses. Let's start. The world of work has been changing. We know that from the times of the Industrial Revolution, workers were exposed to extremely high levels of pollutants. And in the early 1900s, workers were working in large mega factories like this in Detroit, where you were employing over 10,000 workers in the manufacture of the Ford motor vehicles. But we come down today in most parts of the low and middle income countries where we have work taking place at a much smaller scale with informal workers. So over a period of time, over generations, we have had the changing world of work. And similarly, we've had a history of how workers are exposed and how their conditions are diagnosed in terms of occupational diseases. We often hear about the stories, and Stephen has done a great job speaking to us today about the histories of the past. But we know the story of Ramazzini, and we celebrate the 4th of October as International Occupational Physicians Day in recognition of this doctor who basically is considered to be the founder of occupational medicine historically. But then there are others, Agricola, Florence Nightingale, Alice Hamilton.
19.
And it was this book by Agricola which started to focus, and this is now we're talking about in the mid 1500s, where he starts to describe the dusts that workers are exposed to and how these dusts then relate to lung diseases and how it eventually consumes the workers. In 1700, Ramazzini, in his work, basically explained similar sorts of exposures and health outcomes. So by the 18th century, we're beginning to get a much firmer understanding about exposures in the workplace causing ill health among workers. And a very key question Ramazzini proposed. When doctors go into the homes of workers, we need to ask just one more question. What is your occupation? Sadly, this question has not been asked. And even today, when we're teaching young doctors or young medical students, we do not emphasize to them about addressing this question when they're engaging with workers. But that was the European history. What I did was I went down to see exactly how the history of the health of workers have been covered in South America. And for me, it was a new journey. I found information that really surprised me, and I realized there is a rich history of over 500 years of the documentation of the health of workers in South America. I must apologize that I'm pretty sure that much of this information is known to the colleagues in the room, but I found this quite fascinating and thought that this presented an opportunity for us to visit this, and particularly for those who are not from South America to be exposed to this sorts of information. So from the silver mining in Potosi to the mercury exploitation in Huancavelica, apologies if I don't pronounce these names correctly, but the history of workers in South America have been well documented. And I just want to get the pointer. And in this book, which is titled in the translated version, New Chronicle and Good Government, already in the 1600s, the work of workers in these two mining towns, the silver mining in Potosi and the mercury mining in Huancavelica, is documented. And it's very interesting in these two graphics here. It shows how these workers are working at the ovens at the foothills of these mountains. And in a short while, I'll tell you the stories about those workers being exposed. Earlier this year, a publication emerged looking at the mine work, the mercury exploitation in Huancavelica. And basically, in this book, they trace back the history of silver mining in Potosi, and they say, very importantly, the mine was considered to be dangerous by the inspector of the time. He knew that the work was at risk for Indians, and not much different from what happens amongst labor inspectors today, he ordered all the work to be stopped. And this is a report that is given in the 16th century. So clearly, the issues of workers and their health impacts because of the work that they're doing is already becoming an issue, even way back in the 16th century. This graphic taken from that article is from a book in 1596 and shows clearly the hazardous conditions under which these workers are working. And this from a viceroy in 1689. The towns were destroyed and many people attributed it to the work in the mines. So already 16th and 17th centuries, we're hearing about the impacts of work in Peru on the health of workers. And similarly, over 500 years of history in Peru about mercury exposure. In order to process the ore in less time, the Indians were being ordered to open the ovens that I just showed you in the graphic a few minutes ago, and in the process referred to as India Blada. This led to a considerable loss of human life. So this is being reported in the 1600s. Similarly, the Archbishop of Lima reporting to the king, large numbers of Indians who had died, and when they bled, mercury came out in the blood. So probably a little bit too graphic, probably not absolutely accurate, but clearly indicating that these workers were dying because of the exposure at work. And once again, in 1600, the Peruvian viceroy to the Spanish king shows that these quicksilver ores gives out a dust that enters into the Indians as they breathe and settles in the chest. It causes them a dry cough and a light fever, and at the end, death without repair. The Indians were put to work as if they were going to a slaughterhouse. For workers who were exposed to mercury, they were even given a name. They were called the azogado, because this was a word from the Spanish word for quicksilver. And look at the symptoms that were being described. Symptoms being described in the 1600s. They became anemic and they lost weight. They suffered powerful tremors of the heads and limbs, which made walking, eating, and drinking difficult. Salivation continually. Gums ulcerate. These are all symptoms that we know to be associated with mercury exposure, and been described in Peruvian workers some 500 years ago. So what have we learned? Those workers who were exposed to those dusts in those mines in Peru 600 years ago, documented in literature at that time. But we fast forward 300 or 400 years to the early 1900s, and we look at the mines, the gold mines in South Africa. The doctors from those mines, writing in the British Medical Journal of the early 1900s, they call out for people to say, we need some understanding of what's going on among the workers that are dying in our gold mines, because we don't have any information, and we know that the dust may be associated with this. In 1905, they said, well, we know that this dust, this disease that these workers are enduring is probably related to the dusty occupations in the mining sector. It took about another 30 years when the doctors from the mining industries all over the world got together in 1930 in Johannesburg and decided, yes, this was a disease called silicosis, and it was as a result of the work that the workers were doing in the mines. Pity they didn't read the books from the Peruvian writers from 300 years previously, because they would have come to the same conclusion. But notwithstanding understanding the exposures between exposure to silica and disease, we still had major disasters. The Goli Bridge manufacture in 1935, where workers drilled through almost pure granite, and thousands of them died. By the 1990s and the 1980s and 1990s, we were still having documentation of workers with lung disease as a result of the dust exposures in the mines. And if you look at this graph, even right up to the early 2000s, we're seeing an increasing prevalence of silicosis. So even though we knew about this for hundreds of years in South Africa and probably about 500 years globally, workers were still dying as a result of these conditions. And not just in the mining sector. Even as recently as 15 years ago, there was an epidemic of silicosis among denim sandblasters in Turkey. We know that these things cause silicosis, but we still continue to expose these workers. So for centuries, we have known that silicosis causes a crippling lung disease, but yet workers still die and continue to become diseased. And as I pointed out, in Peru, we already documented that the health effects associated with mercury from some 500 years ago. But we fast forward to a little rural area in South Africa, where the company Thor Chemicals, which relocated from the coastal shores of the United Kingdom to the rural parts of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa to continue its mercury recycling. It became one of the largest mercury recycling companies in the world, accepting mercury from all over the world. And the picture on the right shows the almost primitive conditions under which these workers were working to recycle this mercury. In 1992, 3 workers were admitted to hospital, diagnosed with conditions described some 500 years ago by the various people in Peru: shaking hands, tremors, unable to talk, unable to walk. The families reported that they slept like the dead. And we looked at the blood results and the urine results of these workers, extremely high, way above any international standard. But we knew already that mercury causes this problem. So why were these workers exposed? These 3 workers died, and over 30 years, these workers received no compensation and no recognition for their problems. 2 years ago, we examined these workers, and a substantial number of these workers have residual problems associated with mercury. So what have we learned over the years? We know how better to control exposure. We know the hierarchy of controls taught to us in occupational hygiene. In occupational medicine, we have a better understanding of markers of exposure, from environmental assessments to biological monitoring. We have more sophisticated tools in our clinical arsenal to understand what is going on with clinically. In occupational epidemiology and occupational health, we perform risk assessments, we understand occupational exposure measures, we conduct medical surveillance, and we know how to control exposures. Yet, according to the World Health Organization, some 2.3 million workers die from work-related accidents or diseases every year. This corresponds to 6,000 deaths every single day. So we know the problem. We know the exposures. We've known these exposures for a long time, but workers still die. Notwithstanding this, as was pointed out by Stephen in his presentation, we continually have new exposures and new diseases. We have exposures that result in new respiratory conditions that he spoke about. These exposures, and in the industrial world, new chemicals are being tested every day. We hear about nanotechnology, biotechnology, and all of these are likely to be resulting in new outcomes. But it's clear that the majority of workers do not have occupational health services. They don't have access to professionals that are well trained to make these diagnoses early enough to protect them from getting these adverse outcomes. Companies prefer to work in remote areas, like Jason pointed out, in the sugarcane fields in Latin America, South Asia, etc., and Thor Chemicals, a major multinational sitting in the rural areas of South Africa. And then there's workers, particularly in low and middle income countries, where there's much different standards of care, much different legislative protection and exposure standards. For example, you'll have multinationals who will have one particular standard that they will follow in the European countries and a completely different standard because legislation doesn't exist in low and middle income countries. So what do we do about this? We certainly need active surveillance, and we need more data to understand what is going on, particularly before disease starts. So we need some things to understand subclinical disease. We need to document the trends of these, and we got to assume that every exposure, no matter how new it is likely to cause disease at some point. We cannot assume that because you're not seeing a particular disease, that there's not going to be a problem, particularly when new chemicals and new exposures emerge on the market. So in conclusion, despite the strong historical traditions of identifying and documenting occupational exposures and diseases, workers are still experiencing adverse outcomes. And even though we know some of these, as I've indicated, for well over 500 years, workers are still succumbing to those old exposures with diseases that have been documented for centuries. We definitely need new strategies. We need to recognize how the world of work has changed, because the standard sort of approaches in looking at establishing sophisticated occupational health services will not reach the majority of workers. Once again, my sincere thanks to the organizers, Novell, to your committee for putting this together and for giving us the opportunity to share this platform with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan, for sharing this great presentation and for pointing out some very important, historical and lessons from well, South America and also from Peru, especially coming from Peru, from what we have been dealing through the last 500 of years. So thank you so much, Dr. Rajan. We hope that we can have you in the next section of the panelists for the roundtable session, because we would like to share with you, just like with Mr. Jason and Dr. Steven. Thank you, Dr. Rajan. So, last but not least, from our speakers, let me check. I will introduce you to our third speaker today. So until now, we have been glad to have two speakers from the Scientific Committee of History of Prevention and of Occupational and Environmental Medicine. And now we're going to introduce the speaker from SCOM, the Scientific Committee of Occupational Medicine, Dr. Tongai Mukwege, who is the current Corporate Medical Officer for Tongaat Hulett, overseeing the health portfolio for the sugar company's operations in 4 Southern African countries. He brings a wealth of experience, leadership, and expertise from a career spanning nearly 30 years in the private and public health sectors. Welcome, Dr. Tongai. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Novel, and greetings to colleagues. Let me share my presentation, and give me a sec, sorry. Okay, I hope you can see my presentation.
Yes, now we can see your presentation, Dr. Tongai.
Thank you. So firstly, thank you very much, Novel, for putting together this event on behalf of the ICOH subcommittee on occupational medicine. I thank you for inviting us to be part of this memorable day. I think Prof. Rajan has kind of highlighted the history of this particular day in terms of occupational medicine, and you've done a very good job in terms of putting together topics that allow us as an occupational medicine community to review the origin of our profession, reflect on key lessons that we've learned from the history, and how it's applicable to the present, and then obviously how we transcend to the future generations. So from the start, I think one of the key things we've talked about, and probably we didn't focus on, was just our role as occupational medicine practitioners. I think the definitions you'll find in any standard textbook, but we're a preventive medical specialty. And part of what determines our work is recognizing and mitigating those workplace hazards, treating those hazards, and then promoting the health and wellness and resilience of our workers in the community. So I think my previous speakers have talked about the history of the occupational health. I just wanted to point out there was a discovery in 2013 of papyruses or papyri from Egypt, and they spoke about the diary of Mera, and he was talking about how the Egyptians, the issues that they encountered with the people who constructed the pyramids, in terms of the diet, how workers were treated, were compensated. So the history of occupational medicine is goes back a very, very long way. I think, as Prof. Rajan has pointed out, we had the Ramanzini, who's recognized as the father of medicine, occupational medicine. He identified numerous workplace hazards and associated diseases. Then obviously Alice Hamilton was another key person in the Industrial Revolution in America, who noted a lot of these things that was happening in America to workers. Now, talking of the future of occupational medicine, it isn't on the horizon. It is actually something that's happening now. And the important thing for us as practitioners is to realize that the change is, we're already in the change. And with the fourth kind of revolution in industry, that being automation, AI, mechanization, digitalization, the workplace environment is rapidly evolving. And for us as professionals, it's incumbent upon us to embrace these advancements and to reimagine the workplace in this digital environment. I'm going to speak about a few, sort of topics that I found quite relevant in this new age. Firstly, that of the Gen Z, or the new age, generation that we have of employees, remote work, that of automation that I've already mentioned, wearables, exoskeletons, immersive learning, and then certain confounders that we have in our environment. And then lastly, human resources scarcity. This image for me kind of says a lot. This is what's out there now. Kids walking around with headphones, earphones on. And a study in Korea showed that 12% of students between the age of 6 to 19 years old were detected by doctors to have noise-induced threshold shifts. It's common knowledge, and I think the current global study of disease shows that noise-induced hearing loss is the fourth leading cause of disability globally. The impacts of hearing loss are, quite significant on your socialization. Obviously, financially, you have to have special hearing solutions for people with deafness. And obviously, those things are impacting significantly on those generations. Smartphones, YouTube, gaming, etc. All that is something that we is further making the use of earphones more pronounced. And despite the fact that we know that with earphones you can have noise levels of up to 136 decibels, often it's impulse noise, the gunshots, the explosions, etc. So that's another significant area which is going to contribute to making our job as the occupational physician in the workplace quite demanding. Another,
Dr. Toma, excuse me, can you make the slide as a slideshow, please? Because can you click yes. Okay.
Are you okay now?
Thank you. Yeah, you're good now. Thank you.
My apologies there. Nobody put I thought it was on slideshow. Thank you very much. And then the other area that we're looking at which is now quite significant, is remote work and risk control. COVID brought some new conveniences of remote or hybrid work, but the challenges that it's brought on are also quite significant. You look at ergonomic issues. A study showed during the COVID period that the majority of workers do not have the right working environment for safe work. Ergonomically, people are working on their laptops, on their sofas, on kitchen tables, etc., and that really is not appropriate for a working environment. So the same report shows that 89% of employees reported musculoskeletal issues such as backache, neck pain, wrist pain, etc. What was interesting to note as well was less than 59% of those who had neck pain actually reported those things to the employer to say, I've got a musculoskeletal issue related to my work. So that's another area of complexity for us to say, when someone is working remotely, how do we control the environment? Obviously, company budgets are not infinite. And, to actually then say to employees, you have to make sure you buy the right work environment in your remote space. That becomes quite an issue. The other issue with remote work, mental health and isolation. Again, one of the key things that was noted was a lot of people are reporting mental health issues because of kind of the change in work environment. I'm now working alone, where previously I had a work team, I had colleagues to support me. Now I'm working remotely, often for extended periods without interacting with colleagues. The work-life balance also comes into it. How often is it that you tend to work longer hours than you normally did? Your family as well is suffering at the same time as an employee, because now you're connected more regularly and quite frequently than just when you're at work. Lastly, there's certain areas like the impact on organizational culture, team bonding, visibly felt leadership. All those are things that we're finding are being affected by remote work and the control of that particular environment. I'll move on to automation and advanced robotics. Growing up, Prof. Rajan was talking about we don't teach our students occupational health, how to ask those, what work do you do? Our students nowadays, in a similar fashion, have new issues that they need to learn about, and probably we may not be doing justice. That of automation, advanced robotics, etc. For the occupational physician in training, I don't know whether we are exposing them enough. So when you look at automation, which is bringing the good things in that those physically demanding tasks and material handling, often in hazardous environments, are now being automated. And we've progressed also to include decision-making and data analysis being automated as well. Advanced robotics is another area where we are seeing those benefits, where those physically demanding tasks are being taken over, as well as sort of the autonomy from those advanced robots. AI is playing a central role in terms of automating those processes, the cognitive bit of it, The robots may do the physical side, but AI does the cognitive. And we found already applications of AI in health monitoring, autonomous driving, and industrial robots as well, the cobots, etc. But from a worker impact, we're already seeing that from reports, the ILO reports 2023 is looking at the potential is close to 70 odd million jobs will be lost worldwide. The European and North American work environments are the highest exposed to automation and AI, while Africa, or call it the lower middle income environments, will face a lower exposure due to the prominence of agriculture and less automation. One of the things found in China as well was with the increased automation, even in agriculture, where drones are now taking over the spraying of chemicals in fields. I think 2023 reported 200,000 drones annually in use to spray, and that has a corresponding decline in employees exposed to chemical. Yes, there are positives from automation and AI, but again, we have certain risks that we've kind of come across now from an occupational perspective. We're losing all those skills that we normally had from the humans who are doing all those various operations, and obviously the job losses that go with it. There's a new term that's been coined, and that's techno-stress, where we're saying it's the difficulty adapting to those evolving technologies, working longer hours, understanding, that certain tasks are now automated. So techno-stress is something that a lot of us are going to be facing, and that's again a new occupational condition. Allow me for, sorry, let me just. I'm going to play something from the ILO.
And AI have brought groundbreaking innovations to help protect the health and lives of workers. Today, robots are operating in hazardous environments, doing the heavy lifting, managing toxic materials, and working in extreme temperatures. They take on repetitive and monotonous tasks, while digital devices and sensors can detect hazards early on. However, digital technologies can lead to accidents, ergonomic risks, work intensification, reduced job control, and blurred boundaries. Not forgetting the safety and health risks for workers across the digital supply chain, including those in extraction processes to those powering AI and workers in electronic waste management. Nevertheless, we believe that through human-centered policies, we can ensure that digital innovations are drivers for safe and healthy working environments for all. To learn more, check out ILO's new report on revolutionizing health and safety through.
Okay.
So digitalization and AI have brought groundbreaking innovations to help protect the health and lives of workers. Today, robots are operating in hazardous environments.
Sorry. Confirm, Ade, you're seeing my presentation in full screen mode, in presentation mode?
Not yet. Respect to the presentation, not slideshow.
Sorry? Have you got it as a slideshow?
No, it's still got slides on the side.
Yeah. I think
okay.
that, yes.
Okay, yes.
All right, great.
Yes.
So that's techno-stress for you there. Okay, so the other thing that we're looking at nowadays is the wearable Internet of Things. And these are all the various devices that can be worn by workers in a host of environment and environmental conditions. So we're seeing the advantages being the real-time awareness of the worker's environment, the wearable, be it a smartphone, be it smart helmets, smart vests, etc., are able to pick up the heat stress levels, noise levels, as well as, monitor the physical health status of that particular individual, their vital signs, etc. There are advantages, obviously, in terms of encouraging and monitoring safety compliance. And obviously, in the dangerous work environments, very, very useful in terms of emergency response data, locations, the well-being of that particular individual. I've often, been quite affected physically and mentally when you see mines that have collapsed in 3 or 4 days, people haven't found that person. This could be one of the solutions that we have. And obviously the real-time analytics and predictive insights that do come from the AI component will assist us. One of the things that we need to be also managing is this is all data that we're collecting. Where does the POPIA or the protection of the data that for that particular individual, how we handle that is going to be another new evolving issue for us as the people operating these systems. One of the key things also that we've come up with in terms of new technologies is exoskeletons. Previously, you had those workers who may have not been physically able, and you maybe define an environment as being for those who are physically fit. Exoskeletons have come along, and they're creating the opportunity for, sort of equalization in the workplace. Lastly, immersive learning. Here, we're saying virtual reality is creating an opportunity for us to give realistic training for employees. There's certain tasks where learning is better from experience, and our traditional learning technologies or techniques are not able to deliver that. Whereas virtual immersive learning is able to do that. We can simulate the worker's environment and allow the employee to actually come across complex and knowledge building scenarios in a virtual aspect. The other key thing for us as occupational practitioners, we often talk and say occupational risk factors are the cause of a lot of our diseases and injuries. And I'm sure that the various numerous examples that were given by previous speakers speak to that. However, we're seeing an increase in the non-communicable diseases and personal risk factors, which can actually compound or make worse some of these conditions that we already know about and that we are saying we have under control. So this ballooning, call it issue of personal risk factors, and especially things like hypertension, obesity, etc., is really making it difficult in the work environment. In the United States, there was another study that was conducted 2021, which showed that in the workplace, a person with one or more of these chronic diseases had an increased absence rate. And when you got to 3 chronic conditions, your likelihood of absenting for more than 10 days increased threefold. So it's quite amazing that we've traditionally focused on the occupational risk factors, but now we need to be considering those personal risk factors as well and how they have an impact on the work health environment. Then training and awareness. Yeah, as much as we've gone through all the industrial revolution and our GDPs are increasing in some of our industrialized countries, it's sad to note that the training of occupational practitioners is not keeping pace with industrialization. So if you take probably on our chart here, the country with the highest GDP per capita and the number of employees, the percentage of occupational practitioner to worker ratio is nowhere near the highest. So that just says a lot to me to say maybe we need to be focusing on training so that we protect the health of the employee in the workplace. Just to use this. We had the hierarchy of controls that again was bread and butter in terms of our training. In the new age, in the environment that we're in, looking at something, for example, like musculoskeletal diseases. Here's our hierarchy of control, which is straightforward. How do we think about it now in the new age of technology? Robotics probably will be the elimination of the and automation of the process that eliminates that hazards. The use of exoskeletons, we were saying we're going to substitute it. That now eases the manual handling. Computer vision, virtual reality, as well in terms of admin and engineering controls. And then obviously from a PPE side, we've talked about the wearables of things. So all these things now, you can see that there's an evolution in the way that we're looking at, something very simple like musculoskeletal disease. And that really now speaks to us to say the future is going to be defined by integrating our previous experiences with emerging technologies that we've kind of touched on today. We need to be focusing on a new range of issues, workplace issues, the stress, and then looking at adapting new work models. We've got our changing worker demographic. We've got aging populations. We've got youths coming partially deaf, etc. All those need to influence the way that we're creating or we're thinking about the protection of employees. So our evolution as a profession is not a choice, but it's now something which is mandatory for us to go through. With that, Chair, I'll hand back to you and say thank you very much for the opportunity, and we will take questions. I don't know whether we've got questions, Novel, or we've got a...
Thank you.
Novel.
Thank you, Dr. Tongai. Thank you for such a great presentation. And we are very delighted to have you as a speaker, just like Dr. Stevens and Dr. Dr. Rajan. We're just very close to the time that we were scheduling the roundtable session. So if you agree, our speakers will also be joining us for the roundtable session. I mean, they can have an active participation. So now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our panelists. Let me share. Okay. So for this roundtable session, we have invited specialists from each region worldwide. So we will have the participation of Professor Mr. Jason Glasser from America, Dr. Gerald Mendez from Latin America, Professor Dragan Michałkowski from Europe. In case of Professor Mr. Jason is representing the Scientific Committee of History. Dr. Gerald Mendez has been recently appointed as a National Secretary from Costa Rica, and Professor Dragan Michałkowski is a member of the Steering Committee of Scientific Committee on Occupational Medicine. Dr. Ade Mutiara, who is representing Asia, she's the current Secretary of SCOM. Dr. Moazzam Zaidi, who is representing Oceania. He's part of the board member, steering committee of SCOM too. And Dr. Claudina Nogueira, who is representing Africa. She's the current National Secretary from South Africa. So welcome to our panelists. Welcome to our roundtable session. And the dynamic from this session will be asking specific questions that we have been preparing, but also we invite the audience to be ready for making questions. So we will start with the first question, which is, as occupational medicine physician, which challenges have you been dealing within your region, and which opportunities do you think occupational medicine physicians in your region can have in the future? So we would like to invite Dr. Moazzam Saidi for sharing with us.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Norval, and the whole team to invite me to the session. It's a pleasure to be with all of you, a broader international community of occupational medicine. I would be representing New Zealand and Australasia while responding to this question. I just wanted to ask that if you can hear me clearly.
I will share your slides. Yeah. Okay.
I wouldn't have any slides at this stage.
Oh, you prefer to
But
share?
is the voice coming clear?
Yes, the voice is coming clear.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. So while responding to it, the two major challenges that we had in Australasia, New Zealand at present, one of them was accelerated silica. How did that come abroad was that we saw that the workers working on the artificial marble tops for the kitchens were getting symptoms and then, of course, the full-blown disease within 5 years and at the max within 5 to 8 years, which is different than silicosis, which has a much longer period, which would be around 30 years or 25 years before we would see these symptoms. When research was done on to the reason of why this is happening, it seemed that the resin also had glue with it, and the way that they were doing it was dry, and hence the amount of dust being created, which was much higher than previous. That would be the reason why I think that these problems took place. Initially, there was a great session. Well, it took about 6 months to a year of lobbying within Australia to stop all kitchen work. And the same is now being taken in New Zealand, and we've tried to bring in better legislation to either ban the product or have the right occupational health and safety processes in place, including the right place where it should be done, wet process, and the proper PPE. One of the challenges that we had while doing this was the appropriate investigations. And to do this, the appropriate investigation was a CT scan. Funding for the CT scan was one of the challenges that we faced between the Ministry of Health and Ministry of WorkSafe, but fortunately we were able to attain the funds, and at present those employees are now being screened at a priority level so that the appropriate measures could take place. In addition to the accelerated silica, the other challenge that we face is the morbidity and mortality, and especially the mortality in two of our industries. One is farming and the other is forestry. Being a smaller country of around 5 million people, we still have a high mortality rate compared to Australia or UK. And that's where we are working quite hard. The cases which we have seen have been a trend are in the farming industry, which are related to the 4x4s that are being used on uneven terrains, and in the logging industry, either because of the terrain on which the logging industry is working at present, or due to the early hours of driving, which these workers at times would be working 12 hours and then drive around 3 hours to get the location. So that means that they would be up at 3 a.m. in the morning and would not be back to their base camp till around 6 p.m. So pretty long days. we've seen some changes over there, and that's where the opportunities come in the logging industry. We have seen some modifications based on the equipment being used and modifications on the way they have decided to take down the trees on inclined terrains. I feel that in both these challenges, we've got some opportunities and we're working towards them. Hopefully, within the next 5 years, we would be able to see the impact of the measures that we're putting in place at present. We've got a farm safe program as well as a forest safe program, and we're interacting with the industry partners directly. So I feel that in a small country, that was one of the benefits that we were able to, the legislator was able to have communication with the industrial partners very easily, and the tertiary educational institutes have been a part of this journey. So hopefully within the next 5 to 10 years, when we'll be presenting something similar, we'll be able to share the benefits of these interventions. I'm cautious of the time, so I'll stop over here. But if I do have a few more minutes, I could go into a little bit of the history of occupational medicine within the area. No, I would be guided by you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Mazan.
You're welcome.
So we're still in time, so I'm going to. Is there anybody from the panelists that would like to participate for the next question? So we have the following question. In your home country, which have been the two most important advances in occupational health safety systems inside companies from private sector? I would like to invite Dr. Ade Mutiara from Asia to participate in this question, please.
Hello, Dr. Norville. Thank you for inviting. Can you hear me well?
Yes, very clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think regarding these questions, I have prepared a few slides for you about the implementation of HS advanced in private sector in Indonesia.
Thank you.
As we know that Indonesia has so many different islands, which more 50% of population in this small Java island compared to other islands. And by the populations, we have more than 70% under the productive age. And the newest data from our country that most people still work in the informal sectors, the farmers, and then the farmers, what you call the fishermen, and on the private sector itself actually is less than 5%. However, this private sectors, since the structure is already has been already established, I would say that the two highest advanced OSC implementation in Indonesia is the integration of OHS management into corporate governance and ESG frameworks, which already issued by the government regulation since 2012 and reinforced by the ministry regulation in 2018 that all private companies in Indonesia have increasingly embedded OHS within their corporate governance and sustainability frameworks. Sorry, it's under Indonesian Bahasa Indonesia. It's from the policy of the OSS, and then the planning, the implementation, the surveillance and evaluation, and then the look back, and then the continuous improvement. So I think it's the same with the basic OHS around the world. but it's already implemented in the ministerial regulation in Indonesia. So it's also already integration with the major corporations, especially in oil and gas, mining, manufacture, and now report OS's performance as part of their ESG disclosure, aligning with the ISO accreditation. And this leadership accountability, top management are now directly accountable for OS's outcome, which has to be reported to the government as the profile for the OS's private sectors in Indonesia. The impact for this implementation that this shift has enhanced safety leadership, preventive culture, and also worker engagement, leading to measurable direction to in lost time injury rates and improved psychosocial risk management. However, I still see so many challenges compared to the injury, compared to the occupational disease, that safety performance is more implemented compared to the occupational medicine related. So the reported occupational disease in Indonesia is still really underreported. So we are the government with collaboration with the private sector, with the local health authorities, is still working so hard to increase the competencies of the doctors to diagnose the occupational occupational health disease. And the second one, I would say the advance in OHC practice in the private sector is for sure about the digital transformations and data driven, which this digitalization of OHC is accelerated during COVID-19. As we all know that everybody work remotely, they really need to use digitally from so many generations. So they in technology application, many private companies have implemented this digital health surveillance platform, mobile incident reporting, telemedicine for occupational health, and also AI-based risk assessment tools like predictive analytics for fatigues, ergonomics, and exposure monitoring. So all in one hand in digital. And also the integration with HR and operational system, that OHS data are increasingly linked with HR information system and production system. This will allow the company to really monitor the fit for duty, to release the employees, whether they are allowed to work remote or in any place during COVID. But now is continued to be implemented digitally as a part of fit for duty, and also based on exposure level and health trends. This digital transformation impact for sure that will improve the fast decision making, also the transparency compared to the manual and time frame reporting. So response time in health safety incidents really already go from the remote sites to the central in Jakarta, let's say, while enabling proactive management and chronic health risks and workforce well-being. In these companies, the digital already implemented and health risk assessment and the well-being monitoring for a non-communicable disease. So these two things regarding the OHC system and digital transformations, I think that's the two things that already and advanced that should be transferred to other informal industry with collaboration with the government. I think that's the thing that I would share to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ade, for sharing such a great overview from Indonesia. And we will wait for some questions at the end of the first round of questions. I mean, from the attendees, and now I would like to make the third question. Oh, let me share. So Which strategies should the government focus more to improve medical surveillance programs for workers? Mr. Jason, we would like to invite you to participate in this question.
I'm going to keep my comments brief because we're short on time and you guys already heard from me for a number of minutes earlier. I think the issue that I work on quite a bit and is relevant both with relatively sedentary populations, but also let's focus on migrant populations for the setup. And I'd like to focus on Costa Rica, actually, and then the Gulf states that take a lot of workers from Nepal, where I've had projects in both regions. And I'm going to just use the lens of the chronic kidney disease that I work on. I think we all know that chronic kidney disease is debilitating. It'll take you out of the workforce. So you're not just taking somebody's life, you're also taking the livelihood of their families. And we've already shown that it drives child labor as kids enter the workforce. So there's all these knock-on effects that we often worry about. But, you know, one of the things that's really prevented association and conversations about causation and therefore responsibility of the disease has been the following. Going back to the 1990s in Nicaragua and Guatemala, the companies knew they had a problem. And in fact, internal documents that, you know, have come to us since when we've improved relations with those companies and got interventions up and running is they thought it was largely the heat more than anything. And they, you know, spent years blaming it on volcanoes and arsenic in the water. And all I could ever think were those are some racist, sexist, classist volcanoes. Apologies for the joke. But the population affected was very specific. And it did not make sense if it was something in the water or the air, given the very high risk ratio for the working age male in the specific industries. One thing I've been thinking about a lot in terms of surveillance is if governments are going to have international agreements on migrant workers and guest worker programs, I feel like a full health survey should be given not just before departure or before hiring, like we still see in parts of Central America, that is not followed up by an end of harvest or end of contract, or at least every 6-month checkup on those same baseline measurements. I would say lung function, tuberculosis, kidney disease, and there's others that we'd want to look at. Why do I say this? Because if you only test people on the screening on the front end for such operations, then it's really just screening people out that are potentially at risk or could bring liability to the employer or to the host country. But if you're looking at it both pre-departure and post-departure, or pre-harvest, let's say, and post-harvest, you're introducing a management system in a way to understand what's going on, who's affected, when are they affected, and then understand, you know, where the levers of accountability and improvement might be. And it's a fairly simple ask. I mean, if we can afford to do these things pre-harvest or pre-departure for migrant workers, then we can certainly afford to do those assessments at the end and understand, like, if that occupational exposure during that time seems to be associated with the declines in health. And it would certainly help the countries sending the workforce, such as Nicaragua to Costa Rica or Nepal to Saudi Arabia or Qatar. And, you know, at the end of the day, the poorer countries leveraged with the burden of caring for people in their workforce who went to go earn money, but now come back broken and battered or dead. And that's not really how any of that's supposed to work. I will note Costa Rica is often viewed as the more progressive and advanced country in Central America, but it's interesting to me that it's Nicaragua where they, despite the many difficulties in that country, I'm not like lionizing the current government, but the industry there has very clearly tested people now at the beginning and the end of harvest and have internalized their responsibility to minimize the incidence of disease in a way I have not seen in the other countries, including Costa Rica. And I think it's an opportunity for Costa Rica to continue to be a leader in the region and adopt that for their migrant workforce of largely Panamanian and Nicaraguan workers in that affected industry, to test them pre-harvest, but also end of harvest, and then have lines of care and prevention based on that data. And I believe some of that has started. I just hope that it continues. Perhaps my colleague from Costa Rica can speak to that, probably more up to date than I am in that country.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jason. So now we'll go with the following question. Based on your experience, which competencies from occupational medicine physician should be prioritized on occupational medicine education programs? It would be great to hear from you, Dr. Claudina, based on your wide experience on education programs.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Norval, for the introduction. I'm going to try and share my screen because I've updated a couple of my slides. Let's see if it'll work.
I also have your presentation just in case you have issues. I can help you.
Let's see, I want to share that one. And let me go to presentation mode.
Yes.
All right, can everybody see that?
Yes, just maybe you can share your full screen. Yes, awesome. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so can you see that? Is that all right?
Yes.
Can you see everything?
well.
Okay, good. I want to thank the organizers of this webinar for inviting me to participate. And today I'm here wearing my hat of ICOH National Secretary for South Africa. And the question which was asked of me is, which occupational medicine physician competencies should be prioritized in occupational medicine education programs in South and Southern Africa? I speak from the context of South and Southern Africa because many of the countries, our neighboring countries, don't have their own standards and legislation, etc. And they often refer to South African legislation and standards in terms of occupational health. Right. Okay, so I'm going to start off just talking about what modules, what are the key competencies that are required. And I have given a priority ranking to each one. I'm not going to go into too much detail and to give examples. I'm just going to say that the first one to look at is the core clinical competencies. This is high priority. And the learning objectives of such a module would be to diagnose and manage key occupational diseases. I've listed some. And to conduct fitness for work and return to work assessments, especially for high-risk occupations. Important to interpret clinical and workplace exposure data to make informed decisions, and also to apply evidence-based approaches to manage TB and HIV and other endemic occupational health issues in South Africa. Some of the suggested activities are case studies in occupational lung disease, workplace visits, and exposure assessments, and clinical rotations in mining hospitals, of which there are now less because our mining industry, while many decades ago was the driving force of the economy, it is now not so much the case anymore, as well as occupational health clinics. A second module, which would be ranked as high to medium priority, would be the preventive and public health competencies. And here, the candidates would learn to conduct workplace hazard identification and risk assessments, and keep in mind the occupational hygiene and risk management aspects of occupational health. They would learn to design and evaluate occupational health surveillance programs and to implement workplace health promotion and disease prevention initiatives, as well as prepare and manage workplace emergencies and accidents. Prepare for. A third competency would be the legal policy and compensation systems. And South Africa's occupational safety and health system has grown out of early mining disease and accident crises, and that's informed the framework to a large extent and the legislation. So in South Africa, there are two arms of legislation that deal with mining and general industry. We have the Occupational Health and Safety Act for both industries, and we have the Compensation Acts for both industries, as well as the regulations that support the Occupational Health and Safety Act as part of the legal framework. They would need to understand the medical legal reporting obligations and ethical practice. And also they would become familiar with the worker compensation systems, like the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act, and the trusts, one of which is the Chiamiso Trust, which is a trust for the compensation of silicosis and TB in gold miners. They would become familiar with these procedures and the facilitation of worker claims. And also they would advocate for worker rights and employer compliance. A fourth module would be multidisciplinary collaboration and leadership, ranked as a medium priority. So collaborations and partnerships in occupational medicine and in occupational health broadly work very effectively and are necessary, and they should interact almost on a daily basis, I guess, with safety engineers, occupational health nurses, economists, industrial hygienists, psychologists, etc. And they should also have very good links with specialist institutions like the National Institute for Occupational Health, academia, professional associations, and international organizations who can all provide very good input and materials for their occupational medicine development. They would lead workplace occupational health and safety program design, implementation, evaluation, and they'd learn to communicate risk and health recommendation to both management and workers. The fifth module of medium priority could be psychosocial and ergonomic competencies. And here they would identify and manage the psychosocial hazards. They would apply ergonomic principles in compliance with the regulations, and they will integrate mental health promotion in occupational health programs. And this has become very much almost like a routine sort of component post-COVID. A sixth module, which we can say may be of low or emerging priority, would be the emerging and future competencies. So the objectives here would be to address climate and environmental occupational health risks, to use digital health tools, and to integrate sustainable development principles into occupational health and safety practice. In summary, and some key messages in the Southern Africa context, and also maybe for low and middle income countries who have a vision to develop their own curricula in occupational health more broadly and maybe occupational medicine more specifically. For South Africa, the priority should go to competencies in occupational disease management, especially silica and mining related diseases, hazard surveillance, and legal and compensation knowledge, alongside leadership skills to strengthen the fragmented occupational health and safety systems. A medium priority would be to build the physician skills in prevention, so such as emergency preparedness and disaster response, to really facilitate and foster teamwork with all the different occupational health and safety professionals, to design and evaluate workplace occupational health and safety programs, to introduce psychosocial health as part of the management of the workforce, health management, and to comply with ergonomics regulations. Low and emerging priority modules could be introduced as future-facing electives to prepare the occupational medicine specialty candidates for example, climate change and environmental impacts. We've heard quite a bit about heat stress today, and others would include vector-borne disease and green transitions. Digital health and teleoccupational medicine, which we've heard as well, also in some of the presentations. And sustainability and future of work perspectives. And this means aligning occupational health and safety with the Sustainable Development Goals and with green jobs. In summary, I'd say that the high priority modules should form the backbone of the program, especially for the early year candidates. And these address the country's highest burden of occupational disease, and they address the system gaps. Medium and low priority modules can be staggered and introduced slowly with increasing complexity in later years or as electives. The medium priority modules serve to strengthen prevention and systems integration, and they're very important for building resilience and improving workplace health, which goes beyond the basics. The low or emerging priority modules are still important, but they can be phased in as systems mature and as they become more sustainable. An important point that I want to stress is the integration across modules. This is very essential for holistic occupational medicine training. So aspects like clinical, legal, preventive, psychosocial, multidisciplinary, and collaborative issues need to be included in the training for it to be holistic. And of course, an overarching broad aspect over all these aspects is the occupational health management and risk management, which is sort of the bread and butter of occupational health and occupational medicine. My parting comment is to speak a little bit about why we need to dovetail with disciplines like environmental health and environmental medicine. So I've listed that they have got lots in common, but I would say that environmental health provides the public health and regulatory context. Environmental medicine brings the clinical care for environmentally linked diseases. And occupational medicine integrates both of these disciplines by focusing on the workplace as a critical environment for exposures. And this is where prevention, clinical care, and policy converge. Thank you very much for your attention and for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Claudina, for sharing such great milestones about the education programs for occupational medicine based on the competencies that we all need for improving our daily job and for contributing with occupational health and safety worldwide. Great presentation, Dr. Claudina.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to share the two last questions. Oh, sorry. So the following questions is, which are the current needs in occupational health and safety education and training programs in Latin America, and which potential solutions do you propose? We would like to invite Dr. Gerald Mendez, who is the current National Secretary from Costa Rica. Welcome, Dr. Gerald.
Hi, hello. So really grateful to be here, sharing with a lot of occupational health specialists. So you can hear me now?
Yes, it's very clear, Doctor.
Okay, thank you. So I need to say that the needs to raise awareness and the training of the occupational health physicians, occupational health specialists around the world are the same in Central American and the Latin American region. So when I were hearing about the needs in South Africa, I say like, okay, that's something like the same that we need here in Central America and Latin American. So right now, I really want to share some special needs about the educational and training in occupational health and safety in Latin America, but more important and more specifically about workers. So we have a lot of informal sector in our countries. We have a lot of informal sectors. We need to train the informal sector. We need to talk about the needs to raise awareness. We need to talk about building a safety culture. When we are here talking about occupational health and safety in our countries, we always talk. Sorry about the noise background. So when we are here in our countries talking about our needs, we talk a lot about building a safety culture. We always talk about countries like Japan, that they have a lot of safety culture. We need to build, trying to make some campaigns about key tools for creating a culture of safety where all workers understand the importance of a healthy and secure work environment, because this gonna help more away from the idea that injuries are unavoidable, because we need to produce, but we need to produce with safety. So we need to encourage communication and reaching the informal sector because, for example, in Costa Rica, we are like 5 million people. We are a small country in Central America, and we have like a workforce of 2 million, 2.1 million people, and we have the 25%, the 30% of the worker sector in the that is in the informal sector. So we need to try to reach the informal sector because they don't receive traditional workplace training, and we need to encourage and try to addressing culture barriers. So I'm not gonna talk about a lot of things that other specialists around the world are talking about the training of the specialists. We need to talk about training the workers. We need to talk ensuring competence, promoting, preventing actions. We need to talk about addressing specific regional hazards because we need to know what is the specific hazard in the specific type of work, in the specific region, and in the specific places around the world. For example, here in our country, now that Dr. Laser were talking about renal disease, that a lot of people have a lot of a specific problem of the loss of competence of the renal system. We need to talk about the climate change because we need to train physicians, we need to train engineer, but if we train engineer and we train a physician, we also need to train reaching vulnerable population, and we need to train workers. We need to create a safety conscious culture, empowering workers and also managers, like we say here in Costa Rica, patronos, the managers of the working force. Here in our region, we lack of qualified professionals. There is a need to expand the pipeline of highly qualified occupational and health and safe professional in the region. Right now, in our country, for example, in Costa Rica, we don't have a program for a specialty on occupational health. So we know that, for example, in the US, now the specialty is known occupational and environmental health. Here in Costa Rica, the specialty is known occupational medicine. We have a few education of the environmental problem, like a problem that we are having in this year or in the last couple of years. So we need to educate and training a lot of physicians in the occupational health safety. For example, I now in the last so like 2 weeks ago, I was in the Latin American Congress of the Latin American Association of Occupational Health that was in Guadalajara, Mexico. I was talking with a lot of physicians of the other country, and right now in Panama and Chile, they are like began a program in occupational health like in the last 2 years. In Costa Rica, we don't have training program of for physician. We know that Colombia, Argentina, Mexico, they have program system. Like I say, Panama and Chile are begun with the program system, but that not enough for our region, and especially for risk you- for risk management. We need to understand that we need to diversify the education. We need to educate people, professional people in the occupational and health and safety, and we need to educate and make training program to the workplace, the workforce, sorry, for the region. We are trying to make this like an issue, like try to face this needs to our region. So I really appreciate to Dr. Norville for inviting me to this conversation, to this program. I'm really happy to try to communicate what is about in our region and what are we need right now in our region. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Gerard, for sharing the perspective and the overview from Latin America, especially the needs for more education and training programs for occupational medicine physicians. So last but not least, I would like to invite to our last panelist. Okay, so we would like to invite Dr. Dragan Michałkowski, who is part of steering committee of the Scientific Committee on Occupational Medicine in ICOH. Professor Dragan, as occupational medicine physician, which challenges have you been dealing with in your region? Which opportunities do you think occupational medicine physician in your region can have in the future?
Thank you, colleagues. I will try to share my presentation. Okay. Tell me, do you see the
Yes.
slides?
It's
Yes, thank
slowly.
you.
Yes, now
Yes.
it is slowly.
Okay. Yes. I will try to explain something about my region, sub-region of Europe where I'm living, that is Southeast European part of Europe. So within the Southeast Europe, we have created a C network on workers' health, which is an international network of WHO collaborating centers, occupational health institutes, and WHO national focal points in order to collaborate in the field of occupational health. So the participating countries in this network are Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Croatia, Macedonia, now North Macedonia, Montenegro, Romania, Serbia, and Turkey. So the total population of the Southeast European Network on Workers' Health network member countries is around 120 million. The labor force is above 50 million. The total geographical area is about 1.4 million square kilometers. And we have a diversity of GDP per capita, for example, which varies between 4,000 American dollars in Albania to about 12,000 American dollars in Croatia. So this network was developed and created at the first WHO sub-regional meeting and workshop, which was realized in 2006 in Skopje, in my own country, and this network is supported by WHO country office in my country, Southeast European Health Network, and ICOH as well. And this is a platform for regional cooperation, international support for national capacity building, and also for exchange of experience and information. And our mission is to create a sustainable network for strengthening occupational health systems in the C sub-region. The purpose of our network is to provide peer-to-peer networking and collaboration of experts of respective bodies in occupational health and also occupational safety and health between and within countries in the C sub-region. Our goal is to improve workers' health and well-being, to strengthen the system of occupational health policy and services, and to build human and institutional capacities through international cooperation. The key principles of our network are voluntary participation, peer-to-peer collaboration, collaboration on an equal footing, sharing information through different channels and mainly through internet, learning from others, learning and training together. So we created in Zagreb in Croatia C Workplace Academy, and other principle is long-term collaboration according to the guideline for the mission and the strategic objectives. We are working together in trust and solidarity in the spirit of collegiality and friendship. And our network is internationally recognized. So we had a meeting within the 5th Ministerial Conference on Environment and Health in Parma, Italy in 2010. Then there was a meeting within the 3rd International Congress on Rural Health, which held in Tirana, Albania in 2010. After that, we had a joint meeting of the WHO Collaborating Centers for Occupational Health, which held in Bonn, Germany, and also there are some other meetings, for example, in Helsinki, Finland, within the International Forum on Occupational Health and Safety. And in 2012, we signed a Bucharest Statement on Occupational Health within the C sub-region, and this statement involves development of occupational health service structures, human resources, development of occupational health interventions, especially for underserved and vulnerable groups of workers, then development of occupational health information systems, because we are struggling with registration and verification of occupational diseases and injuries and work. And also we are working on development of programs for occupational health for health workers and development of sub-regional projects for research on emerging risks. And some of our key achievements are implementation of WHO Global Plan of Action on Workers' Health and BCA activities, or bilateral collaborative agreements between Ministries of Health and WHO Euro, which were conducted in Albania, Croatia, Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Turkey. And these are some of our recommendations for strengthening occupational health and safety in C countries, for example, to prioritize workers' health at policy-making level, to establish and strengthen the national occupational health institutes, to promote public health approach in occupational health through stronger collaboration between health and labor sector, to implement basic occupational health services concept for vulnerable groups of workers, to improve information system and to stimulate national and international partnerships. So within this process, we have different collaborative partners such as WHO European Center for Environment and Health in Bonn, Germany. I've also mentioned the support by the International Commission on Occupational Health, Southeastern Europe Health Network, Baltic Sea Network, European Agency on Health and Safety at Work, International Labour Office, Ministry of Health and Ministry of Labour in each country. And also we are supported and our work is recognized by the universities and medical faculties in each country. So within the last several years, we also had some meetings and congresses. For example, the congresses in Croatia in 2019 and 2024. So for the next year, we are planning a congress in our country in Skopje, together with the scientific committee on occupational medicine. And I would like to mention a capacity building project which was conducted during the pandemic, and we have performed online training of trainers and online training courses for health workers in national languages in each of the country members of the C Network on Workers' Health, and we have trained about 1,600 health workers from different C countries which participated in those trainings. And we also contributed to the implementation of WHO Western Balkans Roadmap for Health, which counted for from 2021 to 2025. We organized some workshops on mental health and work, and we had a special webinar about identification of new and emerging occupational risks and new ways to prevent this risk in C countries, which was conducted by the Serbian Institute of Occupational Health. In some research activities, we included more than 2,600 health workers from different countries in order to find the connection between job stress and job satisfaction during the pandemic in these countries. We've realized some research topics in different research journals, and I would like to conclude that the emerging topics in occupational health in C countries are occupational health system and policy, universal health coverage, verification and reporting of occupational diseases, vulnerable groups of workers, mental health at work, new and emerging occupational risks, climate changes and workers' health, and evidence synthesis in occupational health. So the networking in occupational health has to provide an enhanced evidence base for identification of health risks related to occupation and to foster safe and healthy preventive strategies. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Dragan, for sharing your experience, and especially for pointing us about the challenges and opportunities in Southeast European countries based on your hard work in your home country and also in different scientific committees that you belong and represent at ICOH. So now we would like to invite first of all, we would like to thank all our panelists. It was challenging to join each representative authority, each representative, a member of ICOH from worldwide, and it has been a great job, and of course, contribution and inspiring job from each one of you to be sharing with us during this roundtable session. Thank you. Now we would like to invite our participants to make questions to our panelists. Also, some of our speakers are still with us, so feel free to make questions, because we have one question, I think, in the chat. Let me check. I think that Dr. Claudina has already replied one of the questions. Yes, there was a question about what are the options for distance learning courses? Dr. Rajesh Kumar Maheshwari was questioning, and Dr. Claudina already replied, saying that in South Africa, various universities have postgraduate programs in occupational health and occupational medicine. The postgraduate diploma in occupational medicine for doctors is mainly a distance learning online program over 2 years with 1 or 2 contact on-site blocks, for example, practical competencies and visits to industry workplaces. As a start, she is giving us information about the PG Diploma in Occupational Medicine program offered by the Stellenbosch University in the Western Cape. So she's sharing a link that we can get access through this. Okay, so any of the participants that would like to make any question?
Thank you, Norville, for the initiative and getting us together this afternoon in Europe.
Thank you. It's been very interesting to have each one of you, coming from different perspectives, from different backgrounds, and of course, different experiences in the field, and not only work experiences, but also life experiences through all these years dedicated to occupational medicine. I think that as closing remarks for this webinar, well, we have that Dr. Stevens talked about the origin and evolution of occupational medicine, sharing the case of bronchiolitis obliterans in popcorn factory workers, which was very interesting. Well, Dr. Rajan talked about some cases in workers from South America, pointing out the cases in Potosí and Huancavelica, which was very impressive. Also, he talked about the silicosis among South African miners, and he mentioned areas for concern, such as new exposures, workers in developing economies, workers who are not in network of occupational health services. And he also talked about a plan for action. For example, we have to consider an improving active surveillance, documenting trends, new strategies to address all these new challenges. And last but not least, Dr. Tongai talked about the challenges for modern-day occupational and environmental medicine physicians. He also pointed out about risk related to automation, advanced robotics, and artificial intelligence. It was very interesting also what Dr. Ade from Indonesia present and shared about advances of occupational medicine in private sector, especially when she talked about the digital transformation and the data-driven occupational health and safety practices, mentioning about technological applications, integration with HR and operational systems. And she mentioned that all these innovations improve decision-making, transparency, and response time to health and safety incidents. Then we had Dr. Mazam, who shared, just like Professor Dragan, shared advances in their home countries, in the regions where they live. And Dr. Dragan and Dr. Mazam talk also about the different opportunities that we can take for the future. Dr. Claudina pointed out about the competencies that we have to include, and it was very interesting how she classified the priorities in high, medium, and low, but not less important priorities for our training as occupational medicine physicians. And finally, Dr. Gerald Mendez from Costa Rica talk about the importance, the needs that we are facing in Latin America, because we need more programs for improving our skills, our competencies, and to give the best of us in occupational health and safety systems. Oh, there is one comment. Well, most of the participants are saying thank you, and they're saying that it's very interesting webinar, wonderful event. So I would like to make a question to any of the speakers. It's very simple question, but tomorrow will be the Occupational Medicine Day, and if you will leave a final message for commemorating this day, which will be that message?
If I may go, make a point.
Yeah.
I would like to say that I think that while we understand the exposures and the health outcomes that workers face all over the world, workers are still experiencing adverse health outcomes, and we need to improve our ability to diagnose diseases, and we need to improve our ability to protect workers from these exposures. We've still got a long way to go. So it's been 400 years since Ramazzini put out his documents, but we still have a long way to go.
Thank you, Dr. Gajen. Okay, so anybody else from the panelists or speakers? Oh, Dr. Claudina, please.
Hello. Hi. Norval, thank you for the opportunity. I would like to add on to what Rajan has said, and also add a little bit onto what I said in my presentation. So the delivery of occupational safety and health services in South Africa relies on a combination of strong legislation and institutional oversight, skilled professionals, workplace structures, and monitoring systems. So these facilitators interact to create a framework where compliance is enforced and hazards are identified and workers receive protection and health services, theoretically, because in practice, gaps remain. There are workforce shortages, particularly in occupational health professionals, and they limit the reach and effectiveness of services, especially in rural and small-scale enterprises. There's inconsistent enforcement of regulations and limited capacity in some organizations, and this further constrains implementation. So strengthened coordination between government institutions, professional bodies, and workplaces, along with some targeted incentives and training, could enhance the effectiveness of the occupational safety and health service delivery. And lastly, South Africa has a triple burden of disease. It comprises communicable diseases, notably HIV, AIDS, and TB, non-communicable diseases such as cardiovascular diseases and diabetes, and injuries. And this creates a challenge which is very complex for both occupational and public health. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Claudina.
I would just, if there is an opportunity to add one statement, is that I think it's very important to stay connected with the worker, listen to them, as they are the best source of identifying what challenges we have in the future. And once we listen to them, we've got enough information on how to address their concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mazam. So we would like from the ICOH Peru members and of course all the Latin America members from ICOH, we would like to express our gratitude to all our speakers, all the participants that has attend and get connected for this very important webinar. For us, it's a very commemorative day tomorrow, but also the next day, 5 October, because it's our National Day of Medicine, of Human Medicine. So two very historical dates this month. I am leaving my my personal email in the chat. So if anyone would like that we can send a recording of the webinar, we will be uploading the webinar in the ICOH Peru YouTube channel. But if you don't have the link for the YouTube channel, I'm sending you my email. I will share also the link of the YouTube channel of ICOH Peru, so you can see the recording that it would be probably be uploaded tomorrow. Tomorrow, I mean, Saturday in the afternoon. I'm sharing the link in the chat so you can get access to the recording of this webinar. Yes, in the chat room you can find it. So thank you, Mr. Jason, Dr. Steven, Dr. Tongai, Dr. Claudina, Dr. Mazam, Dr. Dragan, Dr. Ade, Dr. Gerald. I think I have mentioned each one of you. It's been a great webinar, and we hope you can join us in future activities. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Bye bye. Bye.
Thank you for an excellent session.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Dr. Norbert,
Yes.
for the
Thank
organization.
you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.